Alright, the first thing we see is that we've got a interface that is quite a bit different from most other applications that we're used to using. Um, you know, this might make a little bit of sense. They're playback controls, nice and big. And then over here to the right, we've got of the playback controls. Over here, we've got a number of different options that we can turn on and off. These same options, like this is all the active metadata and passive metadata that can show up over top of the clip. No matter, application independent, the way that we would get into that as well, like if we're someplace else, we don't have Firstlight open, we come up here to our Cineform C, right click on it, and we can go into active metadata and we can turn these on and off here too. We can also jump into 3D display type, decoder settings, including like demosaic, which is for raw footage, and just the quality versus playback settings for it. I'm gonna set fast desktop playback. While we're there, let's take a look around here. So the first thing we've got is we've got a database up here to the left. Current is DB. DB is your default database, and typically you're not going to need to change that. The reason you might is, like, let's say I've got 20 clips loaded up here and I've got looks applied to all 20 clips, and then I decide I want to completely change up those looks, but I don't want to lose what I just, I'd already set up. I can create a new database by clicking down here and click on new, or I can branch that database and create a new starting point. So right below that, I've got 3D display type, which we were just talking about a little bit, which we're not going to get into here, but if you're working with a 3D project, you've got the ability, without needing a big expensive monitor, to do 3D playback and to see it off of, right inside of Premiere or Vegas, or, on a Mac you can get into that and look, watch on Final Cut. So very, very cool. A lot of possibilities there. Clip library, this is where all your clips are going to show up. And then down here at the bottom, we've got NLE sync. What this means is if I've got my clips loaded up over in my timeline in Premiere and I'm working on it, let's say the clip that I currently have my my playback marker over top of, if I've got NLE sync on over here and automatic sync, if I jump back to Firstlight and I want to tweak it, it'll automatically have that clip selected here in Firstlight, so I don't have to go searching for it and browsing through what could be hundreds of clips. So over here on the right, we've got active metadata and burn-in controls, these two tabs. This one here is where we're going to control all of our color information, as well as our framing, cropping, anything like that. And then we've got burn-in controls. This is our passive metadata. This is where we're going to have like all the fun stuff like time code, frame numbers, and this is also our tool, where our tools are located, like histogram, waveforms, different things like that. And we control those too by being able to see them with these two guys here. Histograms, waveforms, that kind of stuff are activated under tools, and then overlay controls stuff like time code, notes, and all that. So we'll get into those here in a minute. I want to just open up OpenGL player preferences real quick and just show you what I've got. Currently I'm running a GeForce with a GeForce 570 card, which is a really nice card on the consumer level, but my Quadro is actually in the shop right now. So what's Quadro card? If you can put a good Quadro card in, highly recommend it. The professional drivers go a long way for keeping Cineform nice and stable and making sure you're seeing what you want. GeForce cards definitely work, but it's one of those things, like the saying, you get what you pay for, and Cineform definitely develops good stuff. There's just so many variables with the way that they work. They kind of spread across, like they spread a wide net across many systems, editing platforms, all that. So the way that they, the number of variables they have to work with is enormous. So just be ready to troubleshoot, and they've got a great support team, like I was saying. They're very happy to to help out. I think they really enjoy it too. Anyway, here in OpenGL, I've got 3D playback disabled. Use OpenGL for 2D playback. For the internal window, this is this guy right here. Primary monitor full screen, which we're not going to be doing. I can just OpenGL not used. And then secondary, if I want to use my second display, which won't matter for you guys today, I can turn that on there. So we'll hit OK, and let's import a clip. I can go up here to File, and then I can import a file, or I can, down here in the clip library, I can right click, and we're going to load up these three. Alright, so we got those in, and let's jump back over to active metadata and get going. The first thing we've got up at the top is our workspace curves. Now, these three clips all came off of cameras that are shooting Rec 709 or 601 and 420 color space. So when Cineform gets a hold of them, it keeps everything in, in a 601 or a Rec 709 gamma or gamma curve, but at the same time it takes everything up to 422. So I mean, you're not getting true 422 because that information never existed to begin with in the original file, but the way that the way that colors might band in 420, or the way they might start to block or fall apart, you don't get that nearly as bad in in a Cineform file that's been turned into a 422 color space. So Cineform, Firstlight also does a good job of recognizing what's the proper input and output decode, encode and decode settings typically. So since these were all pulled off of cameras like that, it makes sense like why we'd be using video gamma. SI log, for instance, like that's if you shot something on the SI2K, which is a awesome little camera. You've got Cineon color spaces, you can set custom ones, you've got RSpace, which I can't wait for our color to make it in there. But then you can also jump into linear light, which at certain times I've found like to actually be helpful. Kind of what it's doing is it's basically, if this is our curve here, when you're working in video gamma, you're working with two curves that have a slight gamma shift to them. That's where the 2.2 and the 2.2 comes from, your offsetting stuff. So for your display, by jumping into linear light, sometimes I've found like high contrast scenes and some tough shots like that can at times be saved. I can tweak those just a little bit more and get a little more information out of them. But at the same time, there's like some drawbacks too. Like it's worthwhile to stay in the proper color space whenever possible. But feel free to experiment, and depending on where you want to push your file in some cases. So let's take a look at what we got. Alright, so next we've got the ability to do our any 3D corrections if you're working with 3D footage, which in our case obviously we're not. And then we've got white balance. So here we can see, I mean, this clip is already really close. It's set at 5600. Let's run a pick here and just check it though. See if we want to shift it at all. That one really jumped. That might be about right actually. So, because this is a pretty, what we're looking at here is like we're shooting during magic hour for this scene here, so we're definitely chasing daylight. It was changing rapidly, so you get to the end of the day and you're trying to do something like that, your color temperature is going to change throughout just an hour-long period really quickly. So let me see, what do I think? We'll split the difference. Moving down, we've got primary corrections here. And I can set my crank on exposure, contrast, saturation, which this isn't always an interesting thing to look at here. So if you really crank up your contrast and your saturation and pull this down, you can start to see how the codec's actually holding up and like how color bands are actually being read. If I hit reset, I'm right back to normal. Gain, gamma, and lift controls, and I'm feeling pretty good there. I mean, to get a good idea of what we've got, let's jump over to burn-in controls real quick and let's turn some settings on there. So now I've got my clip selected. You can see I've got a bunch of stuff that's showing up here now under metadata, and it's easy to overlook all this and to get a little bit confused by it too. These are all controls. This is all stuff that we can read, that we can take a look at. So There's a lot of stuff there. And let's start with getting our tools up. So let's work with this clip. Let's add a histogram. Look at that. And then we've already got a waveform loaded up, I see. If I hit remove on that, I can get rid of it. And let's add it back in, but let's put it over on the right side. So I can do that off of justification here. And just so you know too, like I can do this on a clip by clip basis, or I can do it on all clips, which means it's going to load them up on everything, no matter what. Which is non-destructive, so don't freak out if you see it. You can turn it on, turn it off, and you can do it right down here, and like I was saying, in these controls. So we've got our waveform selected. I'm going to hit add, and I want to flip it over here. And let's take this back a little bit so we can see what's underneath. We can turn our opacity back. I can select histogram. I can do the same thing. Turn it back to 75. Cool. And we can see how nicely they're working too. You can really tell like where the bikes are circling around here, because they're so dark compared to those leaves and that. They just run right through there. So now that we've got those activated, let's jump back over here to active metadata, and let's start messing with her a little bit. So I just want to make sure I feel like I've got a good base setting. Pull that down just a little bit. You can see how quickly lift in these kind of files can just blow things up, which we don't want. I'm gonna keep that off the floor, and let's pull our gamma down just a little bit, and push our gain back up. So I've got, just trying to spread my my histogram out just a little bit more, just so I can go down here to the next part, which is where I really like our looks. So these are all 3D loots, and I'll show you here in a minute where you can find these if you don't have them already. There's a number of different Cineform look files that you can get. I've got some custom ones that I've made too, that I made in speed grade on set. Let's take a look here. I'm going to apply one. Let's try good candidate. So these are a number of different looks I've developed for Monsters Under the Bed, and I can load them up and just kind of flip through them and see what I like. Each scene that I've got has a little bit different of a feel to it. Overall though, everything's kind of heading towards like this crunchy green here. This is one of my favorite ones I've got. So it's like how much like I've really desaturated everything, but at the same time I'm like really keeping a hold of the reds there. You can see how much the in the waveform, like everything just really kind of spreads out along the reds. Just feels pretty nice. And my blacks look pretty good. I think I'm pretty happy with that as is. So, I mean, if I wanted to push stuff up and down, maybe touch on a little bit more contrast, I could try it, but I don't really think I need to. And maybe in the lift, just to get a little bit more color in there. I'm gonna bring a little bit more green into the bottom there. Let's push it, and you can see how it's lifting down here in the histogram, or how it's in the waveform especially. So I think that looks pretty good. Next setting down, we've got debayer. This is if you're working with raw files and have a whole lot more information in them than what the standard 422 or even 444 files have. So typically just leave that on default. And then under framing here, we've got our different crop options here too. So I've been working with Monsters Under the Bed. I've been working with that in a 235 aspect ratio. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going to just kind of reframe this a little bit, because these bikes keep popping out of the top of the frame. So I want to make sure he feels, our boy Jonah feels like he's right there in the middle. There we go. You can see what we've got. Let's turn off our tools. It's that easy. Now, edit with that compared to editing with this. It's a whole different emotional feel. That's what I'm saying. Like, working with Cineform, I mean, just alone has some really powerful connotations for just like how you're going to think about your, how you're going to look at footage. Like it's like you're working with final product in some ways, and it's not like it even has to be, but it gives you a chance to experiment and see just how that might be affecting your story. Which then I will argue that you need to be able to have the best story with the least amount of bells and whistles possible first. But I think the idea of like working with something like this is it just helps out a lot. So now we've got that. Let's go ahead and save here. What I'm doing is I'm saving a project file right now. And what this means is it's going to be able to load up my clips with all the information that I've got. I'll be able to, including the database that I've got selected. So we'll call this Cineform project. How about that? That's a big, complex name. It's going to be hard to remember. It'll be hard to remember what the heck it's for. But, hey, that'll do. Alright, so in the next part here, we're going to take a look at how to balance out the other clips so they feel the same as these guys. And then we'll also pull in that red footage and mess with it a little bit.